Hi everyone, my name is Natalie and today I'm going to do my September wrap-up. So I wanted to get this out while it still felt relevant because my mind is all over Victober. So I'm going to start off talking about the book that I don't have a physical copy of, and that is Pumpkinheads, written by Rainbow Rowell and illustrated by Erin Hicks. And this is sort of a autumn rom-com. It follows two young people working their last night on the pumpkin patch that they've been working on in the last few years of their lives. Sort of the plot point of this book is that the boy is planning to confess to a girl that he has had a crush on for the last couple of years, and that he knows that time is running out and he needs to talk to her before he loses his chance. So both of them are sort of looking for this girl and moving around the pumpkin patch area, and all the while we see their friendship, and it's sort of a nostalgic story as well, in that they are experiencing something that they know they will lose soon, and it's really autumnal, really cozy. The characters are really fun, and I love the illustration style to this book. I just really enjoy this one, and I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for a graphic novel to read this fall or this autumn. Then definitely pick this up. A book that I reread this month was Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, and this is the Swedish translation version that I own, but I actually listened to it as an audiobook narrated by Stephen Fry. I am not a big fan of this book in the series. I think the main reason that I don't really like it is because first of all of the main characters are teenagers. There's sort of an unnecessary amount of drama because of their age and their selfish way of looking at the world, or at least they seem all to think that their troubles are, that they are the only ones experiencing troubles. So it's the way that a lot of the conflict in this book just gets on my nerves, and in particular characters like Ron, who is still able to distrust Harry even though there's no reason for him to do so, and there's been nothing for him to base that distrust on. And in general, I think this book is the first time that Harry is so distant from everyone in the school. So in previous books, even though he has a hard time fitting in at times and he has experienced a lot of hardship, he still has an admiration and has been in a way part of the new wizarding world that he has finally entered from growing up in a world that he is basically invisible in. So this book is sort of feels a little bit like he has to go back again to being invisible or being a pest, and I don't really like that aspect of this book. I think it makes it a much less enjoyable book in comparison to the other ones, even the ones that comes after this, because he still has a meaningful network of people who care about him. In this book you can really see how he is so isolated from everyone around him. So this is by far my least favorite, I think, if not the fifth book, and I think I will wait a little bit until I move on to the next book because I hate Umbridge, so I'm not sure I'm ready for her yet. In the beginning of the month I really wanted to focus on translated books. In particular I wanted to get to a few of the women in translation that I had meant to read in August and did not get around to. So I decided to pick up Cottage by Eva Meijer, which is a fictionalized account of a woman called Lynn Howard, who grew up as a musician. She came from a fairly wealthy family and she became a professional musician, but then later in life decided to move to the countryside and to spend the rest of her life studying birds. What I loved about this is the time when Lynn Howard is actually studying birds. The observations that she makes, the experiences that she has, those parts I think come to life through Eva Meijer's writing. Overall, I think this book is good, but for me, it never really stood up on its own, separately from the person that it's based on. So I found it so interesting to learn about Lynn Howard. I think she seems to have been a really interesting person, and she wrote a few books on birds as well that I wish I could get my hands on. But the parts of this book that I liked the most was in general just learning about Lynn Howard, and wishing that I could get closer to Eva Meijer's source material. I don't feel like Eva Meijer really succeeded in making this a novel. It just didn't really capture me fully, and I think that is a shame. I am interested in reading Eva Meijer's other book. She is coming out with a book called Animal Languages, which is a nonfiction book that comes out in November, and I think it might be interesting to hear Eva Meijer's own opinions and own interests and thoughts. The next one that is also a Women in Translation book is Territory of Light by Yuko Tsushima, and this is basically a novella. It was published in the 1970s, and it follows a woman who has separated from her husband. They have a young child together, and this book opens with her separation from her husband and finding a new flat for herself and her daughter. And a lot of this book is about the difficulties in being a mother on her own, her trying to figure out how to live after the separation and sort of what she wants to do with her time. The lack of network and other people in her life, her failing in being the kind of mother that she wants to be, or that she feels she needs to be for her child. The child shows a lot of distressing symptoms after the separation, and she doesn't really handle them very well. I think this book has a lot of beautiful insights into the struggle of a single parent household, especially in contrast to the Japanese culture and norms. I didn't love everything about this book, and I think, again, there's a kind of distance in this, much like I felt with Bird Cottage, that there's something in the emotional aspect that I didn't completely connect with. But I think I liked this book more in what it was actually doing. I feel like the commentary around the themes of expectations and gender roles, and of the difficulties in living up to your own expectations as well, are more significant and hold more weight for me. This is a book that I would recommend, and I think that I also have a feeling that this is a book that I will appreciate more with time. I think this might be a book that I will gain something from in rereading, whereas Bird Cottage, I feel like there's something lacking in it. This one, I feel like it might just be that I need more time with it. The last translated book that I read in September was The Oxford Murders by Guillermo Martinex, and this is the story of a PhD student. He's a South American mathematician, and he moves to Oxford to do his PhD there, and he becomes involved in a string of murders, or at least in the beginning they're not quite sure whether the deaths are murders or not, but there are messages being sent out in connection with the deaths. So there's a suspicion that there's a serial killer on the loose in Oxford, and he, the PhD student, along with a professor in mathematics that he's become entangled with, try to solve the mystery and find who is responsible for these deaths. I wasn't really that happy with this book overall. I think I really enjoyed the reading experience, but I don't think it's a particularly good book. So I felt like it was sort of a bit superficial in the execution. It felt like the way that the mystery itself was actually handled was cliche, and it fell flat for me basically, and that is always a big problem with a mystery, because that is sort of the whole the key to the book, is if the the way that the story resolves doesn't really hit home, then it feels like the whole book is a bit pointless, and that was a lot how I felt about this book. I think the mathematics aspect was interesting, but it didn't really it didn't feel like it was really utilized in the way that I really hoped it would be. I think the setting was what I liked most about this book. In the Oxford setting and the university setting, I think really worked and made it a fairly atmospheric book to read. I really want to learn more about mathematics, and this book only strengthened that wish. The next book is a book that I buddy read with Amy Anders, and I will link her channel in the description. And we read All Among the Barley by Melissa Harrison together. And this is a historical fiction novel set in the 1930s, and it follows a young girl, Edith's coming-of-age story in a fairly rural community. She is a part of a farmer's family, and it talks a little bit about the way that the First World War affected them and their work. Talks about her coming of age and sort of figuring out what she wants out of her life, and it also deals with her mental breakdown. We both had issues with this book, let's put it like that. I didn't think that the writing was anything spectacular, and I'm wondering how I would feel about her nonfiction. Probably the main issues I had with this is that even though it is a character study, it doesn't seem to show a lot of character development. Edith doesn't really change throughout this book. For me, a coming-of-age story requires some kind of change and some kind of journey, and she doesn't really go on a journey. She is resisting the change, which could have been an interesting theme, but it doesn't really go anywhere even in the commentary about her resistance. As I said, the main problem I had was the lack of development, the lack of change in the main character that this book so closely follows. The other problem I had is that there's a lot of things going on, a lot of sort of mini plots, but they don't really come together for me, and I don't feel like they really had importance to, they didn't really have relevance to each other, and didn't have much of an emotional punch for me. I'm not really that interested in reading any more of her fiction, but I might pick up one of her nonfictions to see if that's a different story. So I did really enjoy the buddy reading. And I think a lot of our conversations were fun for me, but the book itself was a bit of a disappointment. At the end of the month, Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventures hosted a readathon in the last week of September, and she will also be doing this in October and November, called Gone with a Book, where you are encouraged to read a book being published between the 1900s and prior to the 1950s. So I decided to pick up Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens and Peter and Wendy by J.M. Barrie for this. I listened to Peter and Wendy as an audiobook first, and then went back to Peter Pan in Kensington Garden. So Peter Pan in Kensington Garden is a basically the origin story of Peter Pan, how he became this sort of half human, half fairy-like character. Peter and Wendy is definitely the better story of the two. But the interesting part for me was that I actually didn't really enjoy the story itself or the events in the story. What drew me to this book is J.M. Barrie's writing. Early 20th century children's literature, there's a lot of authors being really present in the text and talking directly to the reader, especially a young reader. And I love that style. I think it's something that I really enjoy in A. Milne and in Frank Baum and in other writers of the time. And that is something that J.M. Barrie does as well. I think the themes that he explores in his writing is really interesting, and things like nostalgia, things like loss of innocence, quite beautiful, and there's a sadness as well to his stories that took me by surprise, but that I liked. I am interested more in sort of analyzing them more than enjoying the story, if that makes sense. So I think I might enjoy this again with Territory of Light. I think I might enjoy this more with time. whereas the opposite is could be said for a few of the other books that I read this month. I think this is a book that will only gain with time and thought in my head or in my mind, but I don't really like the story, so it's sort of a strange way to feel about a book, but that is the way I feel. And I do really want to read more of Jane Barrie's works because I liked his writing a lot in this. So the audiobook though, I will link the particular audiobook that I listened to of Peter and Wendy. It was fantastic, and the character of the Darlings especially, so well done in the audiobook. So I would highly recommend it if you want to read Peter Pan. Those are all of the books that I read in September. Let me know if you have read any of these and your thoughts. I would love to know, especially if you read Peter Pan and your thoughts about them. I hope you're having a good start to your October, and I will talk to you soon.